of our survey of the Bible. Continuing from last week is the lesson on Jacob and his family. The text started in Genesis chapter 28, but we progressed, I believe, a couple of chapters past that, one or two. We went through a couple of concept questions. One was chapter 28, describing the dream that Jacob had at Bethel. So we talked extensively about that, the dream that Jacob had at Bethel. Then we talked about Jacob's marriages to both Leah and Rachel and how he had to wait 7 years for each. And then we talked about how that trick that was played on him related to the trick that he had played on his dad in regards to his brother Esau's birthright. So we looked at that. Let's look at Genesis chapter 29. Genesis chapter 29 and 30, because these two chapters touch on half of the questions we ended last week. We talked about the relationship that Jacob had with Leah and how he did not show favor to her because his favorite was Rachel, so he loved Rachel more. And it said in verse 31 of Genesis chapter 29, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So it seems to be a pattern here between fertility of each generation going all the way back to Abraham and Sarah, which is interesting. That's a Bible study in and of itself. So that's important there. Also, realizing the reason why fertility was so important was because the promise was made even past Abraham to Adam and Eve that Eve's seed with a capital S would basically fix the things that Adam, Eve, and Satan destroyed in the Garden of Eden. So therefore, you need to have children in order to be a part of that. So we recognize that Abraham is obviously in a lineage of Adam and Eve. And then now you're going from generation to generation. So once you get the promise made to Abraham about his descendants being innumerable, as a woman, you obviously will want to have children even more so, even if you didn't want to already. Question 7 was list Jacob's sons and their mothers. Who was his daughter? Which son was born after Jacob left Padan Aram? So let's look at Genesis 35. Just to jump ahead very quickly, Genesis 35 and 16 through 18. Let's read those set of passages really quick. Genesis 35, 16 through 18. Okay, so the last child was Benjamin. Okay, remember that because that's going to come into play a little bit later. So I just wanted to read those set of verses because they come into play later. Okay, let's look back at chapter 30. Let's look back at chapter 30. And we'll stay in 30, 31 for the bulk of today. Okay, so let's read verses 1 through 6. Genesis 30, verses 1 through 6.
Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I die." And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? So she said, here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her to bear a child on my knees, and that I also may have children by her. Then she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as a wife. And Jacob went into her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan.
All right, so now we have a great little triangle here. Let's go through Jacob's kids. Um, Leah was unloved. We looked at that last week, and therefore, verse 31 of chapter 29 said God opened her womb, right? Leah had a son named Reuben. Now, you remember Reuben, right? These names should start being familiar. Now, the reason why we're going through this is because in the lineage before, Ishmael is not all of that important, and neither are any of the sons or the kids from the concubines throughout the history. But in Jacob's lineage, these kids are important, right? These kids are the 12 tribes, right? Like, it's not only Rachel, right? Leah's children are also involved in this. So let's look at this. Reuben was the oldest, born to Leah. Also, when we get to Joseph, right, anyone who has been raised or has half brothers or sisters can attest to this, right? Now you can start seeing the disconnect between these boys when you know that they didn't have the same mother, and it was obvious to everyone that Jacob loved Rachel more, right? So keep that in mind. And just fast forward, right? You know, when it was all about Joseph, and he was really looking for his brother Benjamin when he was older, right? And he wanted them to say, hey, bring Benjamin to me, because Benjamin was the youngest. So and his mom died giving birth to him. But anyway, we'll get into that in the weeks to come. Reuben was born to Leah, first one. Um, then we have Simon, verse 33 of 29. And then we have verse 34, Levi, and then we have Judah, right? Those that came from Leah. Now, how important is Judah and Levi to the lineage of the Israelites? Extremely important. And they came from Leah, the one that Jacob did not love, and God opened her womb. Isn't that interesting? Like the Levites and Judah is the quintessential cornerstones of Israel culture. Without the priest in the lineage of Judah, you have nothing. And it comes from two women, right? A family playing a trick on a trickster. So don't feel bad for Jacob, because he was tricking too. And the one that he chose not to show favor, God opened her womb and these things happened. So those were those. Then we have a reoccurring story, right? Which has been in the history of mankind for a long time, where if the queen cannot have children, usually she will give a maidservant or something. In this biblical setting, we know that this is repeated behavior, right? Because this same thing happened with Sarah, right? So anyway, she can't have a child. She gives the maidservant, and is the maidservant's son a part of the 12 tribes? Because his name is what? Dan, right? So now in this generation, pretty much whatever Jacob does with whoever he does it with, they're all going to be included in the 12 tribes, which is very interesting, because remember, 2 generations ago, it was not that way. So Abraham gave some finances to his concubine's children before he died. He settled all things, but it was clear that Isaac was the seed, right? The lineage. So that's important to see. Now, we're not going to go through all of these, but if you look through, and I mean, if you're thinking about Sunday school as a kid, sometimes we teach this as a song, but you'll read through this and it's listing all of these sons, right? Now, if we get down to verse 19, Leah bore how many sons? By that verse. Yeah, what does that say? Okay, so if this was a competition, Leah is Leah is by far ahead. Like this is she ready for the championships already. Like this is past playoff. Now when we look through 19, I'm going to read 20 21 and 22. Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have bore him 6 sons. So she called his son Zebulun. Now, dwell with her meaning what? She's hoping that what will happen with the relationship. Go ahead, both. So he stopped hating on her, right? Because I gave you 7 sons. Maybe you live with me now. Forget Rachel. She can't have anything, right? No, that's Rachel. Leah is good. Leah is fertile. She can have children.
But then Leah, there was a time after her 4th child where she didn't have children, and she sent her maidservant Zilpah inside.
Right.
And then she bore 2.
Yeah, she had Gad and Asher. Yeah. Right, correct. And then verse 21 says, afterwards she bore a daughter. Her name was Dinah. Now you can go all the way to Genesis 34. Yeah, because Dinah means judgment. Let's look at Genesis 34:1 really quick. Just to kind of somebody read Genesis 34:1. Okay, now that whole chapter, if you want to get a nice little story, you can read that on your own time. 34, it talks about that. 22, now God shows up. God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name who? The Lord shall add to me another son. Right? So now you have Joseph and Benjamin. So now when you have Joseph having dreams and his dad giving him this Technicolor coat, now you see the disconnect, right? Because the other boys are going to say, you just got here. You barely was born. Your mom couldn't even have no kids. She had one, then she died having the other kid. So you think you're better than us. So now you can see the family rivalry and the feud based on how these children were born and who came in what order, Mom.
Why Jacob favored Joseph. He loved Rachel, and Rachel was the one to give him the son. So Leah gave him sons, which was wonderful. But when Rachel bore a child back to Joseph, because he loved Rachel so, that made all the difference in the world, because he wanted an offspring with Rachel. That's who he loved. So it's not that he didn't love his other sons, he loved them, but there was something different about having a child with the woman that he absolutely adored.
Right. And it's important to see that because favoritism was played, right? Same thing with Jacob and Esau, because the parents played favoritism, they fed into that. Because Joseph was overly favored by his dad, he created that animosity, right? Because those kids felt like what? The same way Leah felt, maybe now he will love me. Same thing with the boys. Maybe now we get rid of Joseph, he'll love us. So it's important to see that as parents, each one of these generation played into this. Okay, let's go to chapter, well, a little bit more in 30, but let's go to verses 25 through 43. Chapter 30, verses 25 through 43. Right? Let's talk about Laban, the bargain between Jacob and Laban. Anybody have that already answered in their book? What is that about? This is Genesis 30, 25 through 43. Let's summarize. What is this about?
It's about the separation of Jacob and Laban. Jacob making a decision to go his own way.
Okay, who's Laban?
Laban is Rachel and Leah's father, the brother of Rebecca.
His mom, right? Right. So now we're leaving his his wife's family, right? So now what? Okay, let's go. Now, what's the separation? What are the terms between the separation between Jacob and Laban?
They made an agreement. Because there was so much wealth and livestock, they made an agreement as to who would take what.
Okay. And let's go a little bit through that agreement. Now we're in verses 30. Yeah, 30. For what you had before I came was little, and it was now increased to a great amount. The Lord has blessed you since my coming, and now when shall I also provide for my own house? And he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flocks. Let me pass through all your flocks today, removing from them all the speckled and spotted sheep and all the brown ones among the lambs and the spotted and speckled among the goats. And these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come. When the subject of my wages comes before you, everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the lambs will be considered stolen if it is with me. And Laban said, oh, that it were according to your word. So he basically took what? The best or the worst? Yeah, Laban thought he was having the best. Jacob was saying he would take the worst, right? He was doing a similar to Abraham. Abraham let Lot pick, and you take the better. But the better ended up being what? Sodom and Gomorrah, which was the worst, right? So we'll come back to that later. Verses 35 and 36. Somebody read that for us.
And he removed that day the goats that were ring streaked and spotted, and all the she goats that were speckled and spotted, and everyone that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hands of his sons. And he said, 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock.
Okay, so the question is, why would Laban do as he did in verse 35 and 36 after making a generous offer to Jacob?
He wanted it to see. Well, yeah, he did.
No, why? He wanted to deceive him. Why do you think? Because what had happened since Jacob got there?
Everything Jacob touched was like a Midas touch.
Right. So, right.
So he probably thought, okay, so if Jacob wants the spotted and the speckled, then if that's what he wants, it's probably going to flourish. I'll take. I'm going to take.
Because then it'll show what? That he lied almost. Because Jacob said, if you find any clean ones near me, then it will be stolen. The point is, if you're employee of the month and you quit, your boss going to be happy or sad? Sad, because who am I going to get to replace you, right? So the point is, Laban never wanted Jacob to leave. He's entertaining him leaving just to try to figure out a trick to get him to stay, right? So that's important to see. Okay, now someone read for us verses 37 through 43. What does that say? 37 through 43.
Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white thread in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled, he set before the flocks in the gutters and the watering troughs, where the flocks came to drink, so that they would conceive when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streak, all the brown and the flocks of Laban. Then he put his own flocks and did not put them with Laban's flocks. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, and that they might conceive among the rods. How far?
43.
But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban, and the stronger Jacob. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks female and male servants and camels and donkeys.
And now read 31 verse 1.
Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has acquired almost as well.
Okay, so now we have family problems, right? Because what happened was Jacob's flock started becoming stronger and Laban started becoming weaker. And it says feeble. So, yeah, feeble is an interesting word. So we look at the result of this is getting bad. Obviously, Jacob is outgrowing his family-in-law, and he's going to have to transfer over to somewhere else. Okay. Question number 10. Now we're in chapter 31. What were Jacob's reasons for returning to the land of Canaan? This is 1 through 55. So you have to have already kind of done this question. What was his reasoning? What verse in 31?
God had asked him, God told him to.
Verse 3, what does that say?
Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and your family, and I will be with you.
Okay, because God knows things are going to start to get bad. Because if the sons of Laban recognize that the dad's wealth is decreasing, that would mean what for them? That their wealth is decreasing, right? That was their birthright. So they may maybe plot to kill Jacob for all we know. So God told him to go back, which is always interesting, to the land of your fathers and your kindreds, and what? I will be with you, right? Verse 11, upon leaving Padam Aram, what did Rachel do?
She grabbed them, or she stole the idols from the father.
Oh, man, poor Rachel. She's struggling. Rachel stole some idols. Verse 19, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's, right? You might have a teraphim in your Bible, teraphim, which means like household idols. Why? Why did she steal them?
Because I think she worshipped idols too. I mean, she grew up worshiping idols.
And that was her what? Starts with a C. People say all the time. That was her C-U-L.
That's her culture.
Culture. Oh, here's the problem, because people do this in church. This is why I say all the time, we have to understand, no one cares about your culture in church. What make your culture any better than my culture? We stop talking about culture in church. Oh, we eat this way. So what? I eat this way. Hey, my culture, men eat first. Hey, my culture, women eat first. You never heard the story about the guy walking through town with his kid, and he had his kid on the camel. And the people in the town was like, man, that's bad that you would let your kid ride the camel and not your dad. So then he took the kid off the camel and put himself on the camel. Then he went to the next town and they said, hey, what kind of father is that, not allowing his kid to ride? Then he took himself off the camel and the kid and went to the third town. And the people were like, what kind of animal lover is this? You don't have anyone riding the camel. The point is, how are you trying to please people, right? The instructions here in terms of Jacob was always what? Coming from a living and breathing God Almighty. That's the problem, right? We have Rachel who's trying to hold on to her culture. Religion is culture. Some people do things religiously because culturally they do. In America, you have freedom of religion, so we don't understand that. But in other countries, they have a country religion, a national religion, just like they have a national language, right? And that religion is their culture. It's embedded in all of their holidays. You take that person from there and bring them to a new country, they're going to miss what? Their culture, their food, their festivals, the way they dressed in certain times, giving gifts. So she was no different. So we have to understand God is establishing something new because people forgot who God was, right? That was the point of pre-flood and post-flood, which is why Abraham was chosen from the lineage of the three sons of Noah that he came from, because they were the only ones still trying to connect back to God, right? So we need to understand that she was trying to hold on to her identity. People identify with their culture. People don't want to lose themselves, right? People come to America and they'll say, what? Hey, we're going to assimilate into American culture, but we want our kids to remain in our culture. Well, that's impossible. Why? Because kids not stupid. Kids going to go to school, then they're going to stop liking their family's culture. They want to do what the other kids are doing. That's the truth. Hey, I want to wear like this. Everyone in school wearing pants like this. I don't want to wear those pants. No, you got to stay true to our code. I don't want to wear that. Then you have a disconnect, right? Because that new child is not raised in old culture, right? It does. If you grew up in Texas, you would like country music. If I took that same kid from Texas and brought to Harlem as a baby and brought Harlem baby to Texas, then when a Harlem baby would say, hey, I'm never going to like country because I'm really from Harlem. The kid is going to grow up not knowing anything about Harlem. Oh, everyone listen to country. You grow up in a culture where it's spicy food, I like spicy. If I take that same baby into another culture that doesn't have spices, you wouldn't say, hey, my family likes spicy food, so I need something in me all my life just felt like I should like spicy, right? You assimilate into the culture that's around you. So that's why it's important for us to understand that this woman wanted to hold on to her culture. The problem with that is when your culture interferes with God's culture, that's why I'm saying we cannot take time to care about those things. You see what I'm saying? Like, because I've seen Christians arguing about cultural things. Your culture is no better than somebody else's. I don't care what it is, even your food. Maybe we don't like your food. Maybe to our taste, it is not good. Maybe to your taste, our food. Why are we arguing about food? You got Christians that stop talking to one another over a plate of food. Why? The point is, in his situation, her culture was something that was an idol. It was a household idol. It may be something she looked at as a statue, a figurine, right? Maybe it's not a big deal to her, but to God, it was a big deal. So that's why we have to look at it from his point of view. Okay, what about question 12? Describe the covenant between Jacob and Laban. What is the difference between the two places named in verse 4? Sorry, 47. So let's skip to 47 and read verses 45, actually, yeah, 45, 46, 47, and 48. What does that say? 45 through 48. Genesis 31.
And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones, and they took stones and made an heap. And they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it
Something.
Jacob called it Galilee.
Okay, and what was the name? Does your Bible have a reference of what these names meant? Both mean what? Anybody? Anyone's Bible have a reference in the bottom to tell you what these two names meant? No one? Heap of witness, yes. Okay, go ahead, sister. 48.
And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Galilee.
Okay, so now what was the agreement that was made between the two of them? So we know that this place is named after as a representation of that witness. What was the agreement? Okay, so hey, we're family, right? Let this heat be a witness to, let's create boundaries, right? Country boundaries, state boundaries, right? There's a place in Georgia and Tennessee where the state lines come right through this bar. And on one side of the bar, the drinking laws are different than the other side of the bar because that bar was there already, right? And then they resurveyed and said, oh, we owe this other state more land and it's going to go through this. So there's a painted line right in the middle of the bar that says that you're in Tennessee, you step over, you're in Georgia. This heap was let's stop this. Let's not let the wrath go any further than this boundary, right? We're not going to do each other harm because at the end of the day, they're what? Family, right? Now they're family because Jacob has both of his daughters and multiple children, right? So that's the relationship between them two. So it's good that they were able to come to an agreement. Okay. Question number 13. Question number 13. Now we're on Genesis 32. Looking at this chapter, Jacob fights with the angel. Now, after settling his difference with Laban, what source of trouble did Jacob anticipate?
Well, he was going back to his land, so he knew he could possibly face Esau. That he would.
Oh, his brother.
It all comes back now.
Yes. Now it comes back to what he did years ago. He'd been living his life, doing his own thing, but there's somebody out there living that wants to kill Jacob, and his name is Esau, his own brother, right? So he anticipated running back into Esau, right? Question 14, what reassurance did Jacob receive as he prepared to meet Esau? What reassurance did he get?
Esau sent him livestock.
Oh, Esau actually gave him something, right? And it looked to be as the relationship had shifted. So when you look at 32 and 33, there's a transition between who Jacob has became and who Esau has became. So we'll get into that in a second. Now, why did he fear Esau? Obviously, he feared Esau for one reason, was Esau was physically stronger than him, right? And physically strong people usually hang around physically strong people. Jacob had 2 wives and a lot of kids. So what army did he have, right? Esau was a hunter. It's a big difference between a street guy and a family guy. Family guy shouldn't pretend to be street guy because you don't know anything about that life. So he would be fearful of Esau just off of Esau's personality, in fear that this guy probably running with a pack of wolves. I got all these kids crying and these 2 women fighting with each other and all this speckled livestock. What could we do? What fight could we wage, right? So keep that in mind, that was his initial instinct or feeling. Question 15, though Jacob prayed for deliverance from Esau, what else did he do to secure a favorable reception? Now, that is verse 8. What does 8 say of 32?
And he said, if Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the other company, which is left, will escape.
So he basically, he divided his family and his livestock, where if Esau take one, you run with the other ones, right? What, if anything, does this suggest about the relation between prayer and human action? What attitude does Jacob show in his prayer? Now, before we answer that, now let's look at his prayer. Let's look at verses 9 through 12. Somebody read that.
But Esau said,
Sorry, 32. Genesis 32, verses 9 through 12.
Then Jacob said, O God, my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear them, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude.
Okay, now let's answer. The question is, he divided the livestock in his family into 2 before the prayer. He admitted in the prayer that there are 2 companies, although he didn't say why he divided them in his prayer. The question is, what, if anything, does this suggest about the relation between prayer and human action? What attitude does Jacob show in his prayer? Yes, go ahead.
Like that prayer, what makes it so stand out to me is he gives all the credit to God. He makes it look, he says it like I'm nothing. Basically, you told me to do this, and I have no power, so it's up to you. And in our prayer, I personally try to give that credit to God and say, hey, I'm not, like, I I think I know all, but I don't.
Okay, so he does acknowledge that God is the source in which all of these things are transpiring, right? But the problem with that is, how does he acknowledge it? He almost makes it seem like it's whose fault? God's fault. Because he's saying, like, remember, maybe you forgot, remember you told me to come here. And then my brother was out here somewhere. So now I had to cross over as two companies. So help me, because remember you said to Abraham that the lineage will be innumerable, right? So he's praying kind of that way, Mom.
Yeah, and it's almost like, I don't want to say he didn't trust God, but again, he took matters into his own hand and made the decision to divide the family just in case, to secure that his lineage would be safe on one end, even if he was attacked on the other side.
Right. So he didn't trust God fully. And that's the problem with prayer. When you say put a prayer request that you already worked out in your heart, take that prayer request and throw it in the garbage. Hey, why would you say that? Because it's insulting. You've already did what the prayer request asking, right? You saying, hey, pray for me. Should I take this job? You already signed the acceptance letter. What are we praying for? Hey, God, please bless this job. And God thinking they already starting Monday. What you want me to do? Oh, you want me to go in future tense, even though maybe that job not for that person. You want me to change my will now. Now that's what we're really asking. Hey, God, change your will. We know you wanted this person to take another job, but bless them in this job because they already starting on Monday. God doesn't work that way. Let's think about Abraham, right? Abraham had to put his trust fully into God to the point where even if God would raise his son from the dead, he would still go forth with doing that. Does Jacob have that same level of faith in this part of his life? Absolutely not. He definitely not killing a kid because he's already dividing up things and creating his own outcome. And then he's going to God and saying, hey, God, hey, you told me to come here. I never would have came here. I would have stayed with Laban. Really? What would have happened if he would have stayed with Laban? He would end up with nothing. So don't go to God that way. Hey, you told me you'd protect me out here. I had to protect you because you and your speckled, feeble little sheep was getting so much attention. They were going to string you up. We need to understand that the way we approach God all the time has to be with reverence and holy. Don't insult God's intelligence, who knows your every thought and knows what's going to happen tomorrow, praying for things that you know you've already done. That is silly. Hey, God, please help this. When you know after church, you already doing that. Even if God answered audibly and say, no, you also were too late because I'm already going right after church. I was just letting you know. Like, that's nothing. It's a difference between saying a kid saying, hey, can I go out with my friends? And calling from, hey, where you at? Oh, I'm already out. What? Yeah, man, I'll just let you know. So can I stay out? Well, I mean, don't matter now, right? Even if I say come back, you already had some fun. It's a very big difference. That's how we go to God. We reason things on an earthly form. We manipulate things in our lives. And then if we come to church Sunday, we say, oh, man, I forgot. Let me get a prayer request. Man, I forgot this. Hey, pray for this. What are we praying for? Right? What you write down that you're involving the church to pray for, what are you really asking God to do? That we don't think that fully, right? We don't think about those things. You start looking at things in your life that you know you've already committed to. You have done. What does your prayer request say? Do we admit, hey, God, help me because I did a wrong thing? Very rarely prayer requests come up like that way. Prayer requests usually about things that we already want to do. And we've already started down our path of doing it. And we want God to do it for us because we want it. Very rarely does somebody say, hey, I'm having this trouble in my life. I see 30 paths. I don't know which path to take. You point the path. Even if it take me 30 Sundays to pray, you point me into the path. Then you wait and see which one of those paths start to illuminate. People don't do that. People going to say, I prayed for 5 minutes. I didn't see nothing happen. So I'm going to start going on monster.com and checking myself because I don't got time for this. That's how we are. We like to step in and resolve it ourselves. Same thing with Sarah, same thing with Rachel, same thing with people all throughout the history of mankind. So that's important for us to see and recognize that that's the relationship between him and his prayer. Anybody else? Okay, question 16. How is the strange account recorded in verses 22 through 32? Now, somebody read that for us. Genesis 32, 22 through 32.
And he arose that night and took his two wives, his two female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the field. He took them, set them over the cliff, and set over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now, when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he took the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip were out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day break. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, What is your name? He said, Jacob. And he said, Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked, saying, Tell me your name, I pray. And he said, Why is it that Jacob asks about my name and blessed Stanley? So Jacob called the name of the place, and for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Just as he crossed over, and someone was on him, and he lay on his head. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shall which is on the big socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob in the muscle that shall.
All right, this is a very interesting story. Okay, pineal, not Spanish pork, right? Not potluck type. He wrestled with this individual all night. Each one is trying to get the best of the other, right? Jacob can't get the best of him. The man can't get the best of Jacob. The man touched Jacob's hip. His hip comes out of socket, so he wrestles him down. He asks him his name. My name's Jacob. He gives him a new name. Israel, does your Bible say? What does that mean? What does Israel mean? Prince with God, right? So we understand that this new thing has been established, and then now you have what? The Israelites, Israelis, the country of Israel, all of that coming from this. Like, that's important to see that there are people even to this day that are tracing their lineage, their heritage, their affiliation all the way back to Genesis chapter 32. It's impressive. It's something that you should take note of. So it's important to look at kind of the transition here. Okay, next class we'll look at in detail questions 17 and 18, but quickly let's turn to Hosea. Hosea chapter 12. Hosea chapter 12. I'll read verses 3 through 5. He took his brother by the heel in the womb, and in his strength he struggled with God. Yes, he struggled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought favor from God, and he found him in Bethel, and there he spoke to us. That is the Lord of God, the Lord God of hosts, the Lord is his memorial, right? And that's a reference to Jacob. So Jacob is living an interesting life. It's also good to note that even though he made some mistakes in his life, God still blessed him and still was trying to refine him into being who God wanted and needed him to be. So that's important for us as well, to recognize that our mistakes cannot define us. We have to be able to be defined by our victories and not by our losses. So next class we'll look into that. Yes.
Also, by Jacob saying, I am Jacob, when God asked him that I am Jacob, he is admitting that he have done wrong, that he is you know what I mean, that deceiver, that, you know, cheater, that,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, no good buddy.
Right.
You know what I mean, that's what he tells us.
Right, right. And it's important to see that, like, when he is the deceiver, God give him a new name. God don't want to have children of the deceiver, right? God rather have children of Prince with God, right? So that's a good point, that it's a transition, hopefully, in his character, right? The interaction should be a transition between who you were and who you're gonna be. You're a new person now. Stop associating with Jacob. All the things that Jacob has done, get rid of that. All the things that Abram has done, get rid of that. Sarai, get over that. Saul, get over that. These are new names, new people now. So that speaks volume to our life and our Christianity as well. Okay, good. Good discussion on that.